Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Mesa in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling, thankful Thursday. So, what do you have to be thankful for today? I have just finished an amazing networking event online. We have a really cool group called Expand the Business, and this group is a whole bunch of different entrepreneurs, business owners, solopreneurs, all that sort of good stuff that are in there, and we get together every Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific, and we go for exactly an hour. So the last couple of minutes was just typing up tonight's description, and from that they can we get good. We don't do a typical networking event where you go around and give you a 30-second commercial. We don't do that. We get broken up into groups and we get asked questions for the day. And one of the questions we got asked today was, where is it? What is your why or underlying motivation why you do what you do? And I thought that was a really, really great question. But we'll get more to that in a moment. So today was Thankful Thursday. So what do you have to be thankful for? Again, I'm thankful for the fact that I got to go and enjoy this group today and met some great people, um, and connect with some people who I already knew. And then we also put thoughtfulness in there today to do random acts of kindness. So what random acts of kindness did you go and do today? Did you get at least one done? I did. It was sending somebody something. Since I can't really get out and do a lot around here, because most people out here at the campground, they disappear for the day. I don't know where all these people go, but they go off for the day, and you don't see them for the rest of the day. So I did it a different way. And then of course I got into my genealogy, researching more about this historical figure, his connections to the family I'm researching right now. It looks like there's a good chance that they are related as distant cousins, because this historic figure had no children. And it was actually quite interesting because I actually got to watch a couple of episodes of Genealogy Roadshow today, and I watched one while I was having breakfast, and then another one while I was having lunch. And there's quite often people go, oh, I want to know if I'm an ancestor of George Washington, as in the president. Well, he never had any kids, so there's no way that you could be a descendant of his. You could have another connection another way. So what people don't realize is that they turn around and say, oh, we've got a connection to this, or we've got a connection to that, and this family and that family, da 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 da. And what they don't do their research to find out that they're no direct descendant of that person, because that person didn't have any kids. So it's very hard to say that you're a descendant of somebody if that person is well known for not having any children. Um, but anyway, so genealogy and history, it's fascinating. I have been like on fire all day today. I've been having so much fun researching these two historic figures that have now popped up. We've got two historic figures popped up. One I kind of knew about, and it looks like there is a connection there somewhere. I just don't know where the actual connection point is. It's going to take a few generations back to get to that point, but there is going to be a connection there somewhere. And then this other historic figure, how they came into the family, and actually found some articles and some stories about how these two families got connected and how they worked together for a while. So it wasn't just a connection through marriage, there was also another connection with the family and how they worked together and kind of hung out together, I guess you could say. But one of my motivating factors as to doing why I do what I do is because I love discovering that personal connection to points in time, to points in history. And when I was watching Genealogy Roadshow, there was one woman who wanted to find out this mystery of her family, um, and it turned out that on her mother's birth certificate, it had written under race COL for colored. Now, when you looked at this woman, she looked like me, um, and yet it had COL on there. And so she asked her mother about it, and her mother was sort of like, "Don't tell anybody." She says, "You are not allowed to tell anybody till after I'm passed, till after I'm gone." She says, "I don't want this brought up. I don't talk about it. Don't mention it to anybody until after I'm gone." And then when she went back, and so they had the genealogists go back and research, and there was this whole connection all the way back with even her parents, her grandparents' birth certificates either had mullard on there or they had coloured on there. They brought up census records where it showed, where it had NEG, which was for Negro. So they had those sort of connections there as well, but it had never been talked about in the family. And she says, my mother looked Caucasian. But she always made sure that when she left the house, she was always done up nicely and everything else, and she always wore a hat. And and that's because she didn't want the sun on her, because it would have changed it would have brought out her her African American skin would have shown up with the sun and the tanning in it. This is what they talked about on the show. I'm sort of like, okay, I get it. So it was very interesting, and especially because they were in the South, and it was different, and it was the times where things were segregated. So we can understand why why her mother wanted to keep this a secret, that nobody knows that she had this mixed race in her. So there was that connection. Then this other guy, they were in Philadelphia, and this guy, oh my gosh, the horrific story that got unfolded about how his was a great aunt married into this family, and how what happened to this family that she married into became a turning point in history. And it was all about this family got lynched, and there was a whole bunch of. I learned all about lynching today, and I was sort of like, how can people do that to each other? I cannot. My brain doesn't comprehend how people can do this to other people. It just befuddles me. Just for looking at a person the wrong way, they would lynch black people, and I was like, seriously? Because they gave you a funny look? Like, yeah, no. So it was very interesting to learn this story and about how this guy's connection to this family had a turning point, and when this guy ended up getting put into prison for the ancestor that married into the family ended up getting put into prison for bootlegging during Prohibition, when he had absolutely nothing to do. It was all completely faked, made up charges. But of course, they waited until he was out of the house to go raid the house. They go in, they raid the house, and the kids are sort of like, what the heck's going on? They just start beating up on the kids. So the older brothers start defending their sisters and everything else. They all get charged for assault and all of that sort of thing, and get taken in. They get through the court cases and everything else. Then they make an appeal, and they're at the point of being acquitted when the lynch mob turns up and takes them out, and it takes everybody except takes the kids out. So at one point you got the dad in there with 3 or 4 of his kids are also in jail. The father's been held there because he's been charged with this bootlegging thing. He pled guilty even though he wasn't. But then his children got taken. The lynch mob came to the jail, took them out of the jail when they had been acquitted, and they're waiting for their appeal. Took them out into this thicket and told them to run. And then when they started running, they shot them and killed them. And I'm just like, how can people do that? But this was actually back in the 1920s. So this was kind of like 100 years ago. And when the father finally got out of prison, he said, like, I can't stay here. So he uprooted the rest of his family, and they moved up to Philadelphia, along with this other family where the guy who had been in the prison, his son, ended up marrying the second great aunt of the guy who was trying to find out this information. I mean, I was sitting there, I just had tears streaming down my face when I was watching this episode. It was just horrific to think that people could do that to other people. I can't comprehend that. I'm sorry. It's just something that my brain just doesn't comprehend, this whole thing. I know it happened in history. I know it's part of history. I just never been able to understand how people could do that to each other. That's just, yeah, it just befuddles me. But then there was this, what was the other one that was, this little girl comes in, and her and mum were there. Now they have the family name of Ingalls. And yes, it is spelled the same way as Laura Ingalls Wilder, as in the Little House on the Prairie, series of books and everything else. They want to know if there was a family connection, and they found out there wasn't a direct connect to Laura Ingalls, but there was definitely a connect as in a cousin. So that was pretty cool. This little girl was sort of like all excited because she was able to go to school the next day, and to be able to go to show and tell the next day and talk about how she is related to Laura Ingalls Wilder. So it's been so it's sort of like when you look at genealogy, you're suddenly looking at these connections that you have to the past, to points in history, and suddenly those points in history become alive for you, and that's what makes them so special. Yes, you can learn about all the history you want to learn about and go, yeah, that's history, and you get some people who are very interested in history, totally get that, because it is fascinating. And some of the stuff, I mean, when you hear the genealogy stories come out, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. It actually happened. If they went and made a movie about some of the stories I get to read, or some of the things I find out as you're researching family trees and stuff, it's sort of like, if they made a movie on this, nobody would believe it. but here's the documentation to support this, and here's the newspaper articles to support this, and here's the court records to support this, or here's the land records to support this. You're finding all this documentation that supports these stories, and you're like, really? So you can find some amazing things out in history and uncover some great family secrets, and some of them will be funny. Some of them there was one girl, her grandmother came over from Italy. Sorry, her great grandmother came over from Italy. This was funny. This cracked me up. This one cracked me up. And she had been brought over to marry a cowboy. And it turned out to be some guy in Denver. We never found out what his name was. But when they looked at the shipping records and things, it showed that her brother had actually come over a year beforehand to be with family that was in New York. And then when they looked at her shipping records, her brother had paid the way for her to come out and meet him in Denver, where she was going to go and marry this cowboy. And so she gets there to the train station and everything else, and she steps off the train, and the guy there to pick her up is the guy she ends up getting married to, who was not the cowboy. It was a German guy she ended up getting married to, and that was the great-great-grandfather. So it was the great-great-grandfather that was sent to the train station to pick up the bride for his boss, his friend, whoever the guy was. And he ends up whisking her away, and they end up getting married. What a cool story. So there's all sorts of real fun stories and stuff in there. Another woman had always heard the story about her great-great-grandfather was a stowaway from Portugal. He had been born in Lisbon in Portugal, and he was a stowaway on a ship. And it turned out he was actually born in, where was he born? Born in Santiago, somehow got to Portugal. No, it wasn't Santiago. It was somewhere in the Caribbean he was born. Somehow he ended up in Portugal. We're not sure on that story. But then from there, he was actually in the Portuguese Navy for 4 years. He was a sailor in the Portuguese Navy before he got on a fishing ship that ended up in somewhere near Boston. That was a big fishing port. He ended up there, and with legal entry and everything else. So the stowaway story was not correct in the family, but it was still a good story to tell. And then another one was trying to find a connection to Blackbeard the pirate, and it was interesting finding out about how to do genealogical searches on pirates, and because they never gave their full name, you had to know what their real names were. But then there were on legal documents they may have given false names and all this sort of stuff. But they couldn't actually find a connection with this woman in Blackbeard, but they could find out that part of her family actually lived and worked and were fishermen in the same area where Blackbeard was known to be in the Carolinas. And they were actually in the county that was right there on the shore with all these little coves and bays and things where Blackbeard was known to go and hide and all of that. So were they known about Blackbeard? Absolutely. Was there any relation to them? They couldn't find the relationship there, but her family definitely would have known about Blackbeard. They may have actually known him, may have had interactions with him. That we don't know, but there was a high probability that because of the community that they were in, and it was a known Blackbeard hideout, so to speak, then there is a good possibility that yes, they could have known each other or known of each. They definitely would have known of each other. But actually having met, then there is that possibility that that family might have had that connection with him. And then we had this really cute couple. They got married and all that. They fell in love, got married and all that. And then one day they were sitting there talking about their genealogy and found out that both of their ancestors came from this little town on this little island just off the coast of Sicily. And so they wanted to know, was there a chance that they could have known each other, that their ancestors could have known each other? Could there have been a connection there and all of that sort of stuff? So in the genealogy research, they found out that one of the great-grandparents from each side both came over were actually on the same ship together, coming over from Italy. And then when they went back a little further, and when they looked at the addresses of where these people lived, they lived like a 5-minute walk from each other. They were literally neighbors in the same area. No, actually it wasn't 5 minutes, it was 500 meters apart. So they're basically neighbors with each other. So the chances that they could have known each other, absolutely. But they couldn't find any records of there being any interactions between the families as far as marriages go. But the likelihood that the families knew each other, absolutely. And the fact that there was 2 of them on the same ship coming out from Italy to the US was also another indicator that the families may have known each other then as well. And then here they come years later. Here's their great-great-grandchildren hooking up and getting married. How cool is that? Anyway, that's it from me for today. Hope you've had a super fantastic, sparkling, thankful Thursday. Go out there, do a random act of kindness with somebody. I am now off to quickly grab some dinner before I have to get on my final Zoom for the day. And tomorrow is, it's Fun Friday and Finish It Friday. And I'm super excited because tomorrow I get to reveal to my client her genealogy tree. So I am super, super excited about that and being able to talk to her about that and walking her through it and showing her the connections I've found out to these historic figures. And, it's going to be so much fun. Anyway, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow. Hei konera!